Hey guys, today we're watching Ancient Rome in 20 Minutes by Arzamas. I have watched this video before, I think. I think I've watched it before, but I can't really remember too well. But let's go ahead, watch it together, and let's see if I can add, because obviously, Ancient Rome in 20 minutes, that's going to be a lot of information really fast. So, let's see if I can add any depth to what Arzamas puts up here. Or see if I can catch any little hints that he throws out there about certain things. Like they did with like Bill Wirtz did in his History of the Entire World or History of Japan, where he casually mentions one thing that's actually super important, but he just mentions it very briefly because, you know, the video is super short. Anyways, enough explanation. Let's just jump into it.
Here are the letters the Romans gave us. And here are the countries whose languages derive from Latin. Today they cover half the world.
Oh yeah! Yeah, English is Germanic. I always forget that. Always forget that.
As for the ancient Romans, the boundaries of their state encompassed their entire civilization. The Roman peace, or Pax Romana, serves as the first example of globalization. Let's take a walk across 12 centuries of the Roman history. And yes, those numerals are also a Roman legacy.
Ooh, the Age of the Kings, alright.
What is Rome? A city on 7 hills, capital of Italy. But that is today. And 2,000 years ago, there it is. Another 1,000 years ago, there. A tiny tribal settlement of the Latins by the river Tiber. How?
Can we just mention, like... Yeah, we know how much technology has advanced in the last 200 years, from muskets to tanks. But, like, imagine... Like, it just seems so far back that we were living in tribes like that. But literally, that was only in 753 BC. That's not entirely that long ago in terms of the global scale. Especially just the global time span of humans. Like, yeah, obviously, if we look at it at the spectrum of the lifespan of Earth, it's very it's minuscule, it's nothing. But even in the time span of how long humans have been around, as we know them, Homo sapiens, that's not too long ago. That just...
How did this manage to conquer the world? First, it was lucky with its neighbors. To the north, the Etruscans of modern Tuscany, a mysterious people whose language has never been fully deciphered. To the south,
and you can thank the Romans for that.
South, Greek colonies. These peoples all traded with each other. It was at the crossroads of their trade routes that Rome appeared. From the very start, Rome has been an open city, a safe haven for outcasts, murderers, runaway slaves. Rome offered migrants a unique opportunity to become fully fledged citizens. This will make Rome the largest metropolitan city of the ancient world. The Romans themselves believed they were descendants of refugees from the Middle East who had survived the Trojan War. Romulus and Remus were the great-grandchildren of the Trojan hero Aeneas. Nursed by an Italian she-wolf, the brothers quarreled where to site the future world capital. Romulus killed Remus, gave his name to the city, and became its first ruler. As legend has it, there were 7 kings, each of which enjoyed a lengthy reign and left some beneficial legacy. A calendar, a sewer system, or the Capitolium, a temple to the senior god Jupiter. Much of what the Romans later became famous for, aqueducts, bridges, perhaps even the gladiatorial games, were borrowed from the Etruscans. This people had invented the Latin alphabet by...
Yeah, the Etruscans were forefathers of Rome.
Adapting the Greek letters.
Mainly because I don't know too much about them. Because there isn't really much known about them.
For their own needs. It's not surprising that their last kings were Etruscan. Rome borrowed her military and government organization from them, while maintaining her stern, patriarchal simplicity. In 509, Rome was shaken by a sex scandal. The son of King Tarquin the Proud raped the chaste Lucretia. Tarquin was expelled, making him the last king of Rome.
It's weird, like, yeah, we know the empire lasted for most of its history, Rome's history, but like I feel like the Republic still spanned like nearly 300 years. That's an impressive feat for such a city, for such a nation state in this time period. And I feel like the Republic is so often, like, I feel like overlooked and not talked about that much because it only lasted roughly close to 300 years when compared to the Empire, which lasted over a millennia, over 1,000 years. Yeah, 1,000 years is a millennia, right? But yeah.
The Romans decided to prevent any such concentration of power ever again.
They tried, and it worked for a bit until, Augustus came along.
From 509 onwards, they elected 2 consuls to serve a year apiece, instead of a monarch. The consuls were controlled by the Senate.
Can you imagine electing someone once a year? I mean, to elect representatives every 2 years, man. That's a hassle. That's annoying hearing their political ads every other year. They start advertising so early. Ugh.
This consisted of 300 fathers, patres in Latin, hence the term patricians. Those not so lucky to be born into the right families joined the plebe.
Not so lucky to be born in the right, that's one way to put it.
Even if they were as rich as patricians, they were not entitled to take up positions in the state.
And that's a similar institution as the Third Estate in France up until the revolution of the French Revolution. If you were born in the Third Estate, even if you were wealthy, you were still not a noble. So therefore, you were not part of the Second Estate. So your vote still had no merit in the general estate, or whatever it's called.
It is in the 200-year struggle for these rights that the Republic, literally meaning public thing, will be formed. The plebeians would make up the backbone of the army, and to have their own way, they would threaten the fledgling state with emigration to a neighboring hill. Each time, the scared patricians caved in, introducing, for instance, the special position of a representative or tribune of the plebeians. These had the right to veto any decisions of the consuls. One of the main achievements of the struggle was the publication of the first written laws. By 287 BC, the plebeians had achieved complete equality of rights with the patricians. The unity of Rome found its best expression in the formula Senatus Populusque Romanus, the Senate and the Roman people, which still adorns the manhole covers in Rome. In 390 BC, the history of Rome could have come to an end. The city was unexpectedly taken by the Gauls. The guard dogs had sensed no danger, for which they would be crucified every year since. Geese awoke.
Yo, that's fucked up. That's fucked up.
Last protectors of the Capitoline Hill fortress instead, saving Rome from complete destruction. The shaken Romans conducted a military reform. The Roman legion was divided into manipuli, making it more mobile in battle. The Roman army spent the next 100 years in constant wars. Instead of simply imposing a tribute on the conquered, the Romans would enter into a treaty of alliance with them, and the loyal allies supply Rome with a never-ending stream of recruits. Thanks to this, the Roman legions were able to stand their ground in battle with the most efficient fighting force of the time, the all-conquering Macedonian phalanx, led by Pyrrhus, a relative of Alexander the Great. The last stronghold of resistance in Italy, the Greek city of Tarentum, then hired the most costly and celebrated...
What's really interesting is how adaptable the Roman army was, or how willing to adapt Rome was in its conquering stages Now, in its later stages, it can be argued that they were not. They kind of, they've been around for so long, they probably no longer were really incorporating foreign strategies or whatever to adapt as they were in these early stages. Like in these early stages in the Italian peninsula conquest by Rome adapted a lot. It was very brushed over in this video, but Rome adapted a lot in these conquests so that they can fight these enemies that they were fighting. And it's just really interesting to see that, like, they were smart. They adapted. They changed their ways to win. And I feel like that's one of the things that's pretty often overlooked, because you just picture the way the Romans fight. Everyone has their idea based upon movies and stuff. They've got the centurions. They're marching in line. They've got their big Roman shields, and they've got their pila. They've got their gladius. I forget the other name for the sword that the Romans used. But, like, for instance, the gladius. That is an Iberian. That has roots from Iberia, from the Spanish region. Even though it wasn't Spanish at the time. It was Iberian. They used that weapon. They had molded that weapon into their army. And other stuff. But because we have this idea, like, it's really often overlooked. Like, we don't talk about how much they changed during their conquests, and how they took ideas and stuff from other nations, other people that they were fighting, and kind of made it their own.
A contemporary warlord of the time to defend against Roman expansion. Having conquered Tarentum and reached Sicily, Rome now had to take on a much more dangerous adversary, Carthage, lord of the Mediterranean. The Romans called the Phoenicians of Carthage Punics, hence the Punic Wars. They were fought over the next 100 years. In 149 BC, Rome had taken the greater part of...
Wow, really, really brief on the Punic Wars. Oh my gosh. Well, the first and second, maybe? Can't remember. I can't remember the time period. It's all blending together. But yeah, Rome, for instance, in this, to beat the Carthaginians, Rome stole like a Carthaginian ship or something so that they could learn how the hell it worked. And then they took that, adapted it, made it their own, and boom. That's obviously very brief. And that sole thing that they stole and adapted is not what allowed them to win the Punic Wars, obviously. There's various other reasons that occurred. But yeah, just to go off my previous points about Rome being a very adaptive military power for the time.
Punic territory and that of their allies, but after each defeat, the trading power of Carthage would rapidly recover. Senator Cato the Elder began to finish every speech with the same refrain: Carthage must be destroyed. And so it was done. The city was wiped out, all of its...
He said it, we did it. He said we must be destroyed. All right, let's go over there and burn it to the ground.
Population was enslaved, allegedly plowing salt into the earth as an eternal curse. Also in 146 BC, the Romans wiped out another city, Corinth, making Greece and Macedonia Roman provinces. Rome appropriated the colossal riches of the disintegrating empire of Alexander, but the patriarchal simplicity of Rome succumbed to the sophisticated Greek culture. Greek became, in effect, a second state language. The Roman nobility busied itself learning new words, hexameter, history, rhetoric. Cicero, the most famed orator of Rome, would come to model his speeches on those of the Greek Demosthenes. However, across this immense territory, full rights were only afforded to the Romans themselves. Even other Italians, the majority of the military, had no citizenship rights. These would demand equality, declare war, and win the right to take part in managing the state. This was a total game changer. While ancient Greece remained a collection of squabbling city-states, Rome gradually extended citizenship rights to the conquered, laying down the basis for an empire.
Yeah. Yeah, I was wondering if you... I didn't want to say anything too soon, because I was wondering if he was including this. But yeah, essentially, to explain a little bit more in depth from what I understand of it, Rome, this is what it meant to be Roman. You had to be born in the city of Rome at first. And then slowly, ever so slowly, over the years, sorry, the ability to become a Roman expanded and expanded further and further into Italy. Okay, yeah, he wasn't going to explain it more.
Having conquered half the world, Rome fell victim to globalization. Cheap grain and an inflow of unpaid slave labor bankrupted the small farmers. These rushed into the cities and joined the ranks of the proletariat, those who have nothing to lose except their own offspring. At the same time, the rich grew 100 times richer, having bought land from the ruined peasants for a song. Previously united, the Senate and the Roman people split into two hostile camps. The tribunes of the people, the Gracchi brothers, would try to reconcile them. They proposed granting excess public lands to the impoverished peasants and suggested free distributions of bread to the poor.
Sounds like communism. I'm just memeing.
The disgruntled senators decided to suppress the Gracchi movement by force, killing the brothers and several thousand of their allies. Rome was gripped by civil wars. Social mobility for the proletariat was offered by Gaius Marius, a popular general. He began enrolling the proletariat into the army with a promise of a grant of land at the end of service. This would make the legions personally devoted to their generals.
Yes, and as he's probably going to talk about, that really set the stage for Rome to turn from a republic to an empire. And it also leads to a bunch of political issues. Now, there are pros and cons to it, as always. Pro, your soldiers are more likely willing to fight prolonged conflicts because, you know, they're being promised land at the end of their service. So they're most likely gonna want to stay. They most likely will not flee or abandon the army because they know, or they believe, because it did not always work out, that they would be given some land. And sometimes they'd also get cheated, I believe. But what this did is that their pay and that grant of land was essentially the general, the leader of that army, was entirely responsible for all that. It wasn't the government, which was an issue. Which I think later reforms made an attempt to fix this to where the government, Rome, paid them instead of the generals, so that the loyalty to the general was less. But an issue with having to give land to every soldier that serves for a certain amount of time, the issue there is you're going to run out of land eventually, or you're just going to have to keep conquering. So that is a lot of money to be spent on conquering, which could have instead been used on the interior, and that fuels further problems inside of Rome, as are exacerbated later on in its history.
In 49 BC, two outstanding generals fought over Rome. Gnaeus.
That's one way to put it. Pompey and Caesar. Two outstanding generals, you know, they had a squabble and they fought for all of Rome.
Pompeius had won the eastern provinces for Rome, including restless Judea, cleared the Mediterranean of piracy, defeated Spartacus' slave revolt, and justifiably added the title Great to his name. Gaius Julius Caesar had conquered Gaul. Nowadays, they would call it genocide. He butchered 1 million Gauls and enslaved as many more. He went on to defeat the Germans and then invaded Britain. According to the law, a general had to dismiss his legions before returning to Rome, and in return have his moment of glory, a triumphal entry into the capital to the applause of the citizens. Caesar performed a hitherto unseen maneuver. He refused to submit to the Senate, and having crossed the Italian border...
I think, supposedly, so, to explain further, from what I am remembering, from the further research I've done, I did not learn this in school, I had to look this up myself because Rome isn't taught in such detail in schools, because there is no, like, ancient Rome class for most places. Julius Caesar, Gaius Julius, at this time, when he took over all of Gaul, he kind of did that illegally. He wasn't allowed to, because Rome, the Senate, has to approve of war. And he kind of just went and invaded them himself with his legions. And he just was like, I can take him over. Should I go talk to the Senate? Nah, let's go take him over. And he just took over all of Gaul for Rome. And the Senate wasn't too happy about this flagrant, I think that's the right word, display of subordinance, and kind of also a display of just Caesar's influence and power. He was kind of showing to the Senate, like, hey, you can't do anything to me until you went and invaded Gaul, etc., etc. And I believe, from what I think they were going to do, they were probably calling him back to arrest him, or they would have essentially made him unable to raise legions ever again if he had gone to Rome peacefully. So, Julius Caesar's reasoning behind marching his legions across the river and into the Roman province kind of is justifiable. From his perspective, like, I don't want to get arrested. I was doing what I thought was best for the country, for Rome, and I'm getting in trouble for it.
The river Rubicon marched his legions to Rome. It would take him several years to defeat Pompey the Great and his other rivals, pitting Roman legions against each other. In the process, Caesar annexed new territories and gave Cleopatra the Egyptian throne. After a romantic cruise along the Nile, she would give birth to Caesarion, or Little Caesar. On his return, Caesar would add Imperator, or Emperor, to his name, title originally meaning victorious commander, and gain control of all political positions: consul, tribune of the people, and dictator. Rumor spread that Caesar wanted to declare himself king. Conspiracy was brewing in the Senate, and Caesar was assassinated. Caesar left his wealth, quite unexpectedly for all concerned, to his grandnephew, 19-year-old Gaius Octavius. This Octavian immediately joined in the power struggle. In 31 BC, he defeated his last rival, the warlord Mark Antony, who likewise had an affair with Cleopatra. The lovers would take their own lives. Octavian was left sole ruler of a vast territory.
Age of Augustus.
Julius Caesar ruled for 4 years. Octavian, assuming the title Augustus, meaning the Venerable or the Great, ruled for an endless 43 years.
Mad lad.
He didn't formally abolish the Republic. He simply took control of all possible positions, making his power...
See, the Republic was still there. It's just that every single position in the government, it was just Octavian. It was just him.
Almost absolute. But he modestly called himself Princeps, the first senator. And even though skirmishes with barbarians continued along the borders, inside them the period of Pax Romana set in, a period of peace and stability that was to last 200 years. The empire experienced an economic upswing. Bread was distributed for free to 200,000 people. On Augustus' orders, a 500-meter basin was dug at the very center of the capital, where 3,000 gladiators mimicked sea battles on real seagoing vessels. In Rome, construction was booming.
We just mentioned that the Colosseum literally could flood, and then they could unflood it for a regular battle. And it had proper cooling without AC, and it could seat so many more people than the average stadium, I think, that's built today. And they had like an automatic roof that they could have slide over to protect from the sun or whatnot. I don't think it could really protect too much from the rain. Or could it? I can't remember. I don't know. It was very impressive. Engineering marvel.
Concrete and
as many of the things the Romans would do.
Augustus had to introduce height regulations, limiting skyscrapers to 6 floors. And still the citizens were unhappy. They complained about traffic jams, pollution of the waters of the Tiber, and high rents. The golden century of poetry dawned. Maecenas, a quasi-minister of culture, allocated special grants to praise the value of the state. Temples would be built in the honor of Augustus, and even a month was named after him. Thus, the cult of the Roman emperors was emerging. They would come to be venerated alongside Mars and Jupiter. After Augustus' power became hereditary, the senatorial opposition has left us vivid portraits of the first emperors. Suspicious Tiberius unleashed terror under the pretext of the law on treason. Under this law, any action could be deemed offensive. It was enough not to sufficiently praise the emperor or pay at a brothel with coins bearing his portrait. In distant Judea, a preacher refusing to worship the emperor as God was crucified. Caligula
That's one way to mention
to make
Jesus.
his horse a consul. A scholar and gourmet, Claudius, was too occupied with feasting and the reforming of the alphabet to keep an eye on court intrigue. One of his wives, Messalina, was giving women of easy virtue a run for their money in the brothels, and the other, Agrippina, poisoned Claudius with mushrooms to enthrone her son from another marriage, Nero. Nero, believing that he was a born actor, not an emperor, would later kill his own mother, and then allegedly the apostles Peter and Paul. Then he again, allegedly, set fire to Rome so as to read the verses on the fall of Troy during the blaze. He would accuse the first Christians of arson and initiated their persecution. And finally, he took his own life. Most details of this era are known from Tacitus, a historian and senator who observed the degradation of republican institutions. Fate of the empire was now decided not so much by the Senate as by the Praetorian Guards, the emperor's personal security force, created back in the times of Augustus. These suffocated Tiberius with a cushion, slayed Caligula by the sword, and hailed Claudius emperor. In all fairness, at the same time, the empire grew, expanding into new territories. Roman legions conquered part of Britain, where they founded a town called Londinium. Provinces were given a transparent taxation system, and the non-Roman nobility began to enter the Senate en masse. A grandchild of an Italian peasant, Vespasian Flavius would become the founder of the next dynasty. Vespasian and Titus, suppressing the uprising in Judea, committed genocide, again according to modern-day, not Roman standards, and reduced the Temple of Jerusalem to nothing but the Wailing Wall. On a lighter note, Vespasian...
Even for standards back then, I think that would be considered genocide. Actually, no, that'd probably be just considered war. Nah, it's genocide.
Had a jolly good Roman predisposition. He taxed the collectors of urine at the public toilets. And Titus, the destroyer of Jerusalem, would nevertheless obtain the title of Merciful. After a splendid triumph, he opened the Colosseum for the people. Titus would be called the love and consolation of humankind. And after such festivities had depleted the public treasury, Vesuvius destroyed Pompeii, plague devastated half Italy, and Titus became a god. The second century would go down in history as the era of the good emperors. Trajan was considered by his contemporaries the best emperor ever. Rome became a million-strong city, and the empire reached its largest extent. Rome connected her new territories via a network of paved roads. This system still determines the transport map of Europe. After Trajan's conquest, Hadrian busied himself with defense, erecting massive fortifications in Britain and between the Rhine and the Danube. Pantheon was built in Rome, the first temple to be topped by a massive dome, a real architectural sensation of the day, dedicated to all the gods. Hadrian would also include his lover among them, the young Antinius. More of his images have survived than of any Roman. The last good emperor, the throned philosopher, Marcus Aurelius would spend most of his reign on military expeditions. In between battles, he wrote his manifesto for Stoic philosophy, Meditations.
Now for the 5 bad emperors.
It was under Marcus Aurelius' son, Commodus, that the Pax Romana, the Roman peace, came to an end. He preferred a gladiator's glory to the affairs of state. Conspirators had the emperor strangled by a fellow fighter, the slave Narcissus. Rome sank into chaos. The next 100 years brought a sequence of random emperors proclaimed by the army, taking their turn on the throne, or a liberated slave, a fortune seeker who bought the throne at an auction, General Punic descent who would place statues of the former enemy, Hannibal, all over the empire, a Syrian priest of the sun, and a...
Yeah, he mentioned it before, but yeah, the Praetorian Guard, they essentially chose who the emperor was, and they chose how long he would rule.
Former shepherd who owed his popularity to his powerful physique. In 212, Emperor Caracalla, half North African, half Syrian, granted Roman citizenship to nearly all free subjects of the empire. The idea that you could be a Roman in Judea, in Africa, or any other corner of the empire at all might well be the main legacy of Rome still in use today. By mid-century, Rome was already in the midst of such a crisis that the whole provinces were starting to split off. The Gauls, for instance, proclaimed an empire of their own. Order would be restored by the son of a liberated slave, Diocletian. Having started his career as a soldier, he would end up an absolute monarch, an astonishing example of social mobility. Diocletian split the empire into 4, with 4 co-rulers at 4 capitals, situated closer to the frontier. Rome lost its significance. The Senate became a town council. The country was now ruled by an army.
I wonder, percentage-wise, could you have a better chance at being an important figure in Rome than you would today being a billionaire? Just like percentage-wise, in terms of, that. Like anyone, I'm just curious, because world population was so small back then, still under 1 billion. Well, today we have 7 billion, but like less than 100 billionaires. I think percentage-wise, you had a better chance at being an influential person, no matter what station you were born in, during the time of Rome. Just saying. But also, you could also become a slave at any time if you were to lose a war.
Of officials personally reporting to the emperor. Thus, the ancient world, centered around the concept of a free community and free citizens, came to an end. From the princeps, the first senator, the emperor had become the dominus, a title by which slaves addressed their masters. The citizen became a subject, the warrior turned into a soldier, and the farmer a semi-serf. Diocletian himself.
The start of serfdom, the start of feudalism. This would establish essentially the next, up until really the last 200 years, peasantry. This is where it started, where peasantry, serfdom, all that feudalism evolved from this moment.
Resigned from the post of emperor 20
TLDR.
years later and went off to his estate to grow cabbages.
Whenever I hear cabbages, I can only think of Last Airbender and the cabbage man.
After Diocletian's departure, the co-rulers were fighting for power. Constantine, the future Saint Constantine the Great, emerging victorious. Before the crucial battle for Rome, he allegedly had a vision of a cross. After this, he made all religions equal. After 300 years of persecutions, the Christians came out of the catacombs and were now entitled to build churches alongside the temples of Augustus and Mars. Constantine would take the cross from Jerusalem to the new capital of the Roman Empire, Constantinople. Theodosius I would make Christianity the official religion and begin to destroy the ancient temples. He would also be the last emperor of a united Roman Empire. His sons split the empire into west and east. The eastern half would live another 1,000 years and is known to us as Byzantium. The western part would fall victim to the Great Migration of peoples. Rome, founded by...
Literally just called the Great Migration. We are amazing at naming things in history.
Migrants would fall to the onslaught of a new wave of refugees. Ironically, the last ruler of Rome would be called Romulus.
Huh.
In modern Rome, not far from the Colosseum and the ruins of the Forum, there is a tomb. Its occupant was neither emperor nor senator, but a simple baker called Ulysses. Likely born a slave into a family of Greek migrants, he later entered into a bread supply contract with the capital and became so rich that he could build such a monument for himself and his wife. Before Rome, in ancient Egypt and elsewhere, or after Rome during the Middle Ages, a man would die in the same station in life as he had been born in. The life and career of Ulysses is an answer to the question of how Rome was able to create a global state that lasted over 1,000 years.
This is a great video. Well edited, well written, well scripted. Lots of great information. I think that's really for the average person. I think this is all they need to know about Rome. Essentially, I think it's good to know about Rome. I think it's good to know that they existed and their general history. But I don't think you really need to, for anyone outside of the history field, I don't think you really need to know too much about them. I just think it's good to know what they did, how influential they are to the modern day still. But yeah, that's gonna do it for today. Hope you guys enjoyed. Remember to hit that like button and subscribe for more. Leave a suggestion down. Leave a suggestion. I can't speak. Leave a suggestion down in the comments as to what you'd like to see me react to next. And always, see you guys next time. Thank you.